Good morning, friends. It's good to be with you as we gather. We're going to go ahead and get started shortly. I know that folks are still trickling in. I want to welcome you all to this second community conversation as we continue discerning God's call to develop affordable housing here on our campus at Silver Spring United Methodist Church. We want to welcome those who are online. If you want to turn, if you're here in our space, and wave at folk that are on Facebook and YouTube, we're glad that you're in community with us today. Today's conversation is the next step in response to conversations held just a little bit less than a month ago here in our building related to what we hoped might happen in future development here on our campus. That conversation involved members of our congregation, members of the adjoining neighborhoods, as well as community partners. And there was lots and lots of good feedback. There were many, many, many good questions. And what you're going to see is the very first attempt to try to begin to capture some of that vision as it emerged and put some pen to paper, as our team at Winsick & Associates has so faithfully done. So we're grateful for that. I want to encourage us as we engage in the conversation today to be gentle with what we're about to see, right? There's a phrase in Scripture, now we see in a mirror dimly, right? So we're beginning to see in the mirror, but it's pretty cloudy. It's not been cleaned in a decade or so. You know, we need some Windex still. And these conversations are the way that we'll begin to clean that mirror, to polish up what we're beginning to see, and to together continue creating what will happen on this corner of Silver Spring. The last thing I'll share is something that I share often with the community and that gathers here for worship, which is this. The effort here is nothing less than working to build beloved community for our community on our corner of Silver Spring. Beloved community, in the work of Dr. Howard Thurman, is the notion, the idea, the dream, the vision that all people in community together are required to work together, bringing all of their resources to bear and helping everyone thrive. That's what we're working to do here, and we're grateful that you're helping us in that work as we build beloved community for our community here on this corner in Silver Spring. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our architecture team at Winsick & Associates for today's presentation.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Booming today. I feel like I'm starting to get to know the regular crowd here, so it's nice to see you all. So I want to introduce Min Soo Kang, who is project architect on this and has been instrumental in creating a lot of what you're seeing today. And you know Temi Fasusi, who's our project manager. I'm going to just give you a quick overview, and then she's going to jump into some of the stuff that we've already studied and show you how the process has occurred, and then we'll work our way to exploring some ideas for the site. We're going to really start by talking a lot about the input we received at the last community charrette. And we're going to try to tie what you told us there into the schemes that we have explored and a vague and early scheme of what we think might meet those needs the best. So with that, I'll turn it over to Temi.
Testing. Good morning. So I do just want to start by giving a little bit of an overview as to, some of the things that were discussed in the last meeting. Just by a show of hands.
Since this is really hard to read, I just want to let you know, if you need to follow along, you can pull out your phone, look at the church website, silverspringumc.org/beloved-community. Look for the word participate, and you will find these slides. So you can look at, you don't have to, get out your glasses.
Thank you, Allison. And I think on that note, we're not going to go through all of these topics because I don't want to keep you here forever, but you can refer to the presentation online if you want the details of everything. But we did have a visioning session with a lot of familiar faces that I see here participated in. Just by a show of hands, how many of you were a part of that session, that most recent one? Great. Thank you so much for your participation in that. So some of the just a little overview of how that worked for anyone who wasn't able to join us. We kind of identified 6 topics that we wanted to break out into smaller groups and discuss, to really get feedback and really just start a discussion of how we address some of these things. So those 6 topics were traffic and circulation, massing and density, site design and site strategies, housing typologies, community impact and amenities, and sustainability. And those topics had come up during kind of some of the previous congregation and community meetings that we had had. So we were able to break out into smaller groups and just have kind of, smaller group discussions on some of the aspects that pertain to all of these. So I'm not gonna read all of these, but a few I wanna point out, in a topic like traffic and circulation, one thing we talked about, of course, was parking. And parking between the church and parking between the future housing. Some of the topics that we also talked about in that session are, retaining some sort of circulation, drop-off and pickup zones, retaining circulation for the pantry. And then, First Avenue was always a big topic, and, whether we want to maintain kind of access from First Avenue to the site or not maintain that. That was kind of a back and forth discussion that we had. So that was a pretty lively topic. Another one was massing and density, where we talked about the building form and not wanting the building to overpower the neighbors and the community and the surrounding community, and just like what aspects we can maybe look into to stop that from happening. So a lot of this feedback was fantastic. We got so much more feedback than we were even expecting, and we really wanted to take all of this and see and do an exploration to see how we can begin to work this into a couple of different concepts. So before we get into a few of the first iterations of concepts that we did, just kind of taking some of that information that we received at the last meeting, things like the vehicular access off of First Avenue. Currently, we have kind of 2 entry points from First Avenue into the site. This blue line here is some of that circulation that we talked about for the pantry service, and that's kind of the current circulation pattern that we think works pretty well for the site and for that service. You can see in the purple some of those drop-off zones that we want to retain for the church, because I think it's important for us to provide this housing, provide this new community, but we don't want to hinder the church functions by doing that, and we certainly don't want to hinder the community functions as well. I do see a question over there. So Ballard is over here. First Avenue is at the top of the page. Apologies, we should have put the labels on there. And then, one thing that was talked about a lot during the massing discussion was the steeple. The steeple is such an iconic symbol of this site, of this church, and we just wanted to make sure, and I think a lot of the community members we talked to wanted to make sure that the steeple wasn't going to be dwarfed by anything we put there. That absolutely will not happen, and we can kind of show you a little bit about that as we go on. But maintaining the steeple as like an important symbol was really important to everyone. So that's definitely an aspect that we were looking into. And then the Georgia Avenue kind of connection and the Georgia Avenue ingress was another one. And one of the things that we want to look at in future iterations is potentially reworking this ingress to be more of a right in, right out type of circulation pattern. Just to ease a little bit of the congestion there. But these are just for kind of your reference. These notes on the side, anything that's bolded or italicized as you're looking at the presentation later, those are items that were taken directly from the feedback that we received that we're trying to address, just to make it a little easier for you to see that. So, taking that information, we explored a couple of early concepts for the site and for the building. And I'm not going to read all these to you, but just overview anything that's got a red line going to it, or, sorry, yes? Yes. Correct. Sure. Sure. So everything, for all of these plans, all the plans that you'll see in the package, First Avenue is going to be at the top of the page. You'll have Ballard at the left, and the church will be at the bottom of the page, just to help kind of orient you a little bit. And anything with a red line going to it are areas where we thought, after looking at the concepts, after talking through them with the team, are areas where we thought we could do a little better in the next iterations, and areas where we don't quite think we were meeting what we wanted to. Anything with the blue is something that we think is actually a positive from the scheme that we could potentially use to inform future schemes. So a couple of items, that I want to kind of point out in these iterations. You can see the building massing. In a lot of these, the building massing, it takes up a decent amount of the site. In a few of these schemes, we have like a larger multifamily. In one scheme, we have a larger multifamily building, but in these two schemes over here, we have a massing with some townhomes placed in different areas of the site. And we think that, the placement of the townhomes in both are actually a net positive. We think we like the placement. We like in the top scheme, we like having the townhomes kind of facing First Avenue. It brings down the scale of the massing to relate to the homes across the street a little better. But placing the townhomes on the page right on the bottom scheme, that also kind of helps relate to the townhomes that already exist here. And that was actually a note that was taken from the last session. That was one of the suggestions that was given. So, we kind of just looked at it and explored a couple of different locations, and we think we can see positives with both, and you'll see that as we get into the next concept. Another big item when it comes to these schemes is the circulation. You can see they all have the same circulation pattern. When it comes, you have Ballard, a connection from Ballard to Georgia. There is no through connection and no vehicular connection to First Avenue, which can be a positive, in some ways, in that we're reducing traffic to First Avenue, and I think that's the direction we were trying to go in initially. But on the previous slide, we did mention that pantry service has kind of a circulation that works very well, that comes in from First Avenue and goes through, and you can see that in any of these schemes, that would be pretty heavily disrupted. So you'd now be recircuiting a lot of that traffic through the same kind of central roadway. Another aspect of the central roadway that we thought we could do a little better on with these schemes is the central roadway kind of bisects the site. So you have the housing at the top of the page, and you have the church at the bottom of the page. But the intention is that the church has some spaces that are going to be shared use across the community, across the housing, and across the church congregation. And specifically, I'm thinking of the gym, and I'm thinking of any potential playground or amenity that we want to introduce in these schemes. So in these schemes, you'd essentially have to traverse this circulation pathway in order to get to any of those, which could potentially create an unsafe environment if you have kids. And because this is the only roadway, this could be a pretty active roadway, especially on Sundays when you've got a lot of traffic on the site. So we thought in the future concept, we kind of rethought that. Another negative potentially that you could have with this is these buildings don't touch. So there's no opportunity for a direct connection between the future housing and the church building, which takes away some opportunities for community, some opportunities for like chance meetings, some opportunities for communication between the two. So that was something that we wanted to kind of look to address in the next iteration of the scheme. And then the last thing I want to talk about with regards to these previous iterations is how far the building extends over to the Ballard Street side. So there's existing residences right here. You can see in all of these, we're pretty much adhering to the 25-foot setback limit from the property line, which basically puts our building massing, which we would be stepping down to like a 4-level in height building, but even with that, you still got kind of a wall of building up against those properties, which may not be the most ideal. So you'll see in the future iteration of this, we tried to address that and maybe pull the building back a little bit so it doesn't feel like it's so close to the neighbors. So, with that, I'm gonna, sorry, go ahead.
So just a couple things we wanted to talk about. So in all these schemes, what we did was tuck the parking underneath. And so the parking would be accessed off this connector road. But what that does to us is it pushes what could be a 4-story building becomes a 5-story building along this connector road. And everything is basically up another level. So again, we'd have 4 stories along here, but in fact, it would really be 5. Again, along this, we really like the idea of putting the townhomes across the street from single family. But to try to maximize home ownership opportunities, we have 2-over-2s, which are a 2-story townhouse with a 2-story townhouse on top. So then, in fact, that's a 4-story building right there against the street. And we weren't able to pull that back in this scheme or any of these schemes. All of the schemes, we started looking at them, we thought we had a good amount of green space, but what we started to notice too was all of the schemes create a wall that sort of prevents people from coming through the site. These 2 schemes, I'm sorry. So we really want to encourage the neighborhood to be able to use the site, and we want to build amenities on the site for the neighborhood. So we looked at these, and this becomes a very private court, and it's much smaller than you might imagine. This court, you can see this is a 60-foot existing parking lot. So this is only about a 45-foot wide space, green space over there. So we started envisioning it, and while we could make it nice, we didn't think it met the needs of what the community talked to us about, or what you talked to us about during those visioning sessions. And then finally, this scheme, we start to get a connection through, but we end up having to push the access to the building way up into the site to keep it out of setbacks and some other issues down here. And so in fact, and that has to be a certain diameter to allow for fire truck access and circulation. And as you see, that's like right in the face of both the lobby and the townhomes in that scheme. So we really wanted to explore a lot of things, and we probably explored 20 other ideas. We just wanted to show you a smattering of what was. And then as Temi mentioned, right now it's envisioned that the gym and some of the space above the gym, there's a double classroom that's now the teen lounge, I believe, and a couple other classrooms that are actually going to be envisioned to be part of the housing, so that because the housing can use that gym as an amenity space, but it'll still be open to the community and still be used by the community. But so by having it disjointed, it really creates some ownership issues and some site planning issues and some legal boundary issues. So you'll see in the next schemes how we try to deal with that. So we're going to go through step by step how we started to look at things. And one of the things that we started to think about was, a vast majority of the parking is going to have to be underground. And one of the big reasons is, we got a lot of parking needs for this site. But also, if we spread it out on grade, as you noticed on the second slide that Temi showed us, maybe you go back to that one, this existing site, you can see how much of that is paved. We don't want to have that. We want to create green space on the site. So that means that we really need to tuck the parking, as much parking under the building as possible. And you can slide back. In some of the earlier schemes you saw, unfortunately, we had this driveway through, and we were able to retain this parking, but we had eliminated any parking that was surface parking that was directly adjacent to the entrances to the church. And we really think that the ability to come in here, circulate, park, and then go down into a garage so that initial visitors and people with disabilities, et cetera, don't need to just automatically be pushed into a garage as they're visiting the church. So there we go. I was missing the colored lines. And then within the parking lot, parking area, we're going to need to separate the uses so that residents don't overpark into the church's area and vice versa. And that's easily done But by having two entrances, an entrance for the housing and an entrance for the church, and we've shown in this configuration for right now, allows that to happen much easier. When they both come in one entrance, then you have to have card gate systems inside the garage that make it complicated. We're trying to make it simple.
And there was a note about bike parking as well. Bike parking is required per zoning, and so, we would definitely be working bike parking. We have to work long-term bike parking spaces into the project as well. So that would likely be located in the garage. And then we would also have some surface bike parking, not only for like short-term spaces, but also for community use. And I know that was something that we talked about during those discussions.
So then this talks, they all interrelate, but this talks a bit about, we always heard that we wanted to make sure that this cut-through traffic that happens today from Georgia up to First Avenue is precluded. And so we think that if we start to create a circulation and an entry point for pedestrians and vehicles on one side of the site and then stop it with green spaces, that would be great to have the housing circulation there. And then having church circulation over here, there's just this need to have some stacking space. And again, if we create the stacking space through here, it would end up falling back into this parking area and potentially prevent people from accessing the garage when there might be a food drive or a community event for the church. So we did think that leaving an entrance and a circulation path with some parking off of it from First is a good idea. What that also does for us is we can retain and enhance the green buffer here and put a green buffer on the other side as well. And so essentially that pushes the building another 40 feet away from the setback line there. So we're about 65 feet away from the property lines of the two homes that are off of Ballard. And then you can see that what we're trying to do is create some circulation through the site. And we want to create a nice circulation path. We'll talk about some amenities that we can envision happening all along those paths. But, public transportation, while a lot of it's going to exist down at the Silver Spring Metro Center, there is the Georgia Avenue bus system, and it'd be really great for the community to be able to shortcut and utilize that. And it makes this an active community versus this closed enclave. So getting in it a little deeper, one of the things we said that we would want to do is depress that parking so that it doesn't end up being exposed in the parking lot areas. So what that actually does for us is it allows us to push the whole building slightly down into the ground. And what that then does is when you extrapolate the first floor out to what might become townhomes, which we'll talk about in a moment, say we develop these as 3-story elements there, they're actually going to be only 2.5 stories relative to the grade at First Avenue. And they're actually only 2 stories relative to the grade at the 3 houses that face us across First Avenue. So by depressing that and creating sunken gardens, so there'd be a retaining wall and some stairs, maybe a pergola or some soft element, and something similar here so that you come in and you can circulate down through the site. And these become more intimate, contemplative spaces that, even though First Avenue doesn't have a lot of traffic on it, it's nice to have that grade separation so that they become spaces that you can feel within nature.
And one thing I just want to point out on this one is, the idea is that, especially this main thoroughfare that kind of meanders through the site, and that's for everyone's use, the idea is that this is an accessible pathway. The reason this is in red is because this sketch, we're showing steps. In the future iterations, we would work ramps and, make sure that these pathways that we're creating are accessible to all. I just wanted to note that.
And then I think we have another slide later about the playgrounds, but you can see, we envision somewhat of a community play space. These green spaces being, I don't know if you know Frederick Law Olmsted, he's my favorite landscape architect. I love doing Olmsted-like settings, and that's how we would envision something like that. But then bringing you down, and there's this great opportunity at this corner where there's an existing, pretty much, well, you have one existing tree here, but the only remaining large tree back on this part of the site. And we can set a nice playground in here, define it with a wall, and again, maybe some tall elements to identify it. And that can become a community playground. It can become a playground that's accessible for the church, for after service play. We're actually reprogramming this space right in here in the church as the nursery center for the church for Sunday services. And again, there's a nice connection there.
And one thing I just want to note regarding like safety and security, you can see how this concept kind of, and Michael mentioned this, it tucks some of these play areas, some of these like amenity congregation areas into the site and away from vehicular circulation and traffic. Whereas you can see on the initial kind of few concepts when we had that crossroad, you would have had to traverse that. So, I think that this concept does a little bit more to kind of tuck those away from a safety and security standpoint. And then just security-wise, we typically would incorporate access control cameras and things like that into our buildings. So that's one of the ways that would be addressed.
And for congregants, just wanted to mention, we are looking at taking this big areaway that's outside of here. If you're down in the fellowship hall, you look out into that concrete void. We can take that wall down, terrace that space down, landscape it, push that grade down so that we're going to be able to actually walk out onto a patio from the fellowship hall area. And then it won't be accessible, but I would envision having terrace stairs that work their way up through the landscaping to allow that to be more interesting. And then also breaking or retaining your existing cloistered arcade, but maybe even extending that out some, and again, identifying it with columns and in a similar vocabulary to what's there. And that can allow you to extend that outdoor space so that it becomes much more useful at Sunday services, or if you wanted to even have a small wedding or outdoor event there.
I'm sorry, did you have a question? I saw your hand was raised.
I wanted to mention that there also are transit opportunities going west, going either Noyes or Ballard, to ride on, as well as to the Purple Line station that will be on 16th Street via Noyes. Either of the two Noises, there'll be access as well. So sidewalks going in that direction.
Actually, I didn't realize that Noyes was going to have a Purple Line station right there.
Well, it's across 16th, but there's access.
So massing-wise, as I mentioned, what we started to do was say, we want to wedding cake this away from the site, or from the First Avenue in particular. And so, in earlier concepts, we were thinking of 2/2s happening, but we started to say, you know what, if we make these into essentially duplexes, but just 3-story towns, but depressed into the grade, so they're only 2.5 stories from this sidewalk, we can keep those much lower in scale, much more in keeping with the scale of the houses across the street. And by making them just double modules, 2, 2, 2, we start to actually replicate the rhythm and the width of the houses that are across First Avenue. So we're trying to make that feel more like a residential street and not just a string of townhomes that's closed that space off. Then stepping back some, we would come to a 4-story element. And we would then put our 2/2s behind the 2.5 stories in front of it there. What that does for us is when you start from the curb here, before we get to a 4-story element, we would be 78 feet from the face of from the curb to the face of the 4-story element, which is basically in the backyard of the houses across the street. So we're just, again, we're trying to set the scale and modulate it. And in these big flat pictures and the massing schemes you're going to see, because they're just planes, it's going to read a little bit more massive because it doesn't have the articulation that we can use to break a building down even further. But we'll talk about it as we go. Then what we would do is we'd step to 4, then we might step to either 5 or 6, and then ultimately keep the main mass of the building. We do need to get up to about 7 stories to meet a reasonable need for the church, which we're envisioning right now in the 150 to 170 range for housing units. And that's of all the different types that we've talked about in the previous meetings. So then we wanted to just highlight amenity spaces again. You know, the gym is a big amenity for the housing, for the church, and for the overall community. I love that the Pinewood Derby takes place there. Sorry.
Hello. Did you say how many units just now? And it just kind of flew by me, or just 7 stories?
150 to 170 is what we're...
150 to 170, okay.
You know, and don't quote us on that.
Yeah.
It's going to vary. You know, this is very sketchy still, and I'm sure we're going to get comments, and we're going to be working.
Well, since I have the mic, when you go to the 2/2 behind the twos, the duplexes, how do the people on the bottom have windows to see outdoors? Or do they?
On these units?
No, the other ones,
These?
to the left. So if I understood it, yeah,
Say
those
here?
are duplexes, 2/2, 2x2.
Yes.
And then behind it is,
Oh, no, that actually, it's going to look like it's towns, but it's actually part of the apartment building.
part of,
Part of the apartment building, but it's kept at 4 stories, and it's modulated as if it's townhouse in our minds right now.
so the ground level people do have windows, is my question.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we plan this out with the units and everything, but that's getting a lot more detail than we need to talk about today. So. If I made a mistake like that, it'd be like doing a stair that you do in college where the stair goes up and hits the ceiling. So, so as I mentioned, the gym is there. We want to develop play space and enlarge this space. We want to develop play opportunities. You know, we didn't show play opportunities in here because we thought of that, again, we like to have spaces that are different. So this could be a space for you to bring your grandchild and sit there and read a book, or for the residents to come out and just, you know, have an outdoor experience. Interestingly, this is sitting on top of the garage, and so we could also have a garage accessibility if these townhomes for some reason needed to have a direct connection to the garage. Then over on this side of the building, you can see what we've really tried to do by this scheme, at least, is to show more circulation space here so that we can access this entrance to the admin portion of the church, and we can make that into a nice green plaza. But then over here, because of the way the garage works, we'll have an elevated terrace. And again, we can landscape that, and it's enclosed by the building shape. And it just, again, it's a different type of outdoor space. And it would actually be in a nice shaded space. I have a space beside my house where it's always in shade. And even when it's 90-some degrees, I like to sit out there and read. And that's the type of space we want that to be. And then we want to develop the roofs. And so, you know, we have the opportunity, and we'll show you some precedent images for, you know, more or less roof amenities on the various elements of the building at different heights. So, and then some of these steps in the building can also become terraces that might be able to be accessed by individual residents. And eventually, we'll have to talk about whether this kind of a building has balconies or not, to see whether that helps break the building up for you. And I think that's pretty much that one, right, Tammy?
Yeah, I think we've got pretty much everything. I do just want to point out, the previous iterations, you can see how, the building shapes created very large, vast spaces. But what we like about this is the kind of intimate, smaller, kind of meandering spaces that spread throughout the site. They're not just on one, road. They're not just, they encourage the use of the site and the, interaction with the site.
And then sustainability, the church and Enterprise, I failed to recognize Ned, the church's partner, Enterprise Community Builders. We were required to be very sustainable because of the funding that's potentially going to be used, but the church and Enterprise are very committed to making this a hugely sustainable building. We'll probably have to have green roofs regardless, because we need to have quality control of the stormwater, and the green roofs really help on that. But it becomes a great amenity space too. When you're walking up there, it feels really nice, and we can actually put planters up on top of that, so it's not just this low-scale planting. But then we also, on all of our buildings, put photovoltaic to try to reduce the energy needs of the building. Typically, there's not enough photovoltaic on the building to do much more than provide maybe the corridor lighting, but it's a step. And there's a lot of different steps we have to take in a building like this to meet the sustainability goals and needs. The program is that we want to make this a net zero building, so that we aren't impacting the environment so much. And as I said, we have this opportunity. One of the things that would really help soften these buildings as well, we've got a building in Washington, the So Others Might Eat headquarters, where we have cascading planting.
My understanding is that in the work that this would do, you would actually reduce the current environmental impact our facility has on the site.
Correct. Yes. So the pastor was saying, through this work, we will actually we will be below the current impact. We will reduce from what it is today to something less, even though we're adding this building. And during this work, if we develop a building in this kind of a configuration, we're going to be taking the old boiler room out of here, and the equipment's past its life expectancy. It's a nice way of saying it's not working so great. And that gives us the opportunity to turn this to make the church itself way more efficient as well. Zero water management, electric vehicle charging stations inside and out, inside the garage and outside. We usually have shared parking or what are they called? Zip cars. Dedicated space for zip cars, et cetera, to try to help the residents.
Can you tell me a little bit about loading docks for moving in and out of the building, how cars are going to get on the property? You may have covered it, and I apologize for being late. Dumpsters, floodlights. I know the Art Space project in downtown Silver Spring, which the neighborhood supported, is quite a nice project. I support it as well, but they've had a problem with floodlights over parking lots or outside of the building, lighting up people's bedrooms nearby.
Yeah, so talk about lighting first. We really pride ourselves. Lighting design can make or break a project. And using building-mounted floods that spill out over the neighbors is not what you need to do. There's cutoff fixtures, there's you can design the lighting so that you place the light exactly where you want and nowhere else. Keeping like bollard lighting along these walkways. So we're lighting the walkway, but we're not throwing light up into people's windows, including our own residents. Loading and trash. we have ideas, you know, loading can tuck in through here pretty easily. Trash would be collected within the building and pushed out on when there was a trash pickup. There's not going to be like a big dumpster sitting outside of the building. And what we do in a lot of these projects where we have an existing building and the housing, we try to figure out a way to allow some connection of those services so that we don't have to have a dumpster sitting outside of the church either. But at this level, we haven't really gotten down to, we know that we have the space for it, but whether it's going to be, say, over here or over here, tucked under the building there, tucked in this side, we haven't gotten to that level yet.
And I apologize, it's a little late, you already talked about. I was just curious about like the traffic flow off of, can I read it? Can you all see it? Oh, okay, sorry. Traffic flow from First Avenue, is there just one access? One access, it just seems so loud. One access point from First Avenue, and is that a public road? Is that a driveway? And what is sort of like the main entrance of the, yes? Is
It's
that
a-
the curb cut as it is now?
It's close to where the curb cut is now. We've talked about whether that could be one way or does it need to be two-way. You know, the main entrance for the church would be here off of Ballard coming in this way. But as I said, during queuing events, which happen monthly right now, I think it is, when there's the food pantry pickup, that's actually working really well for the church, so we wanted to maintain that. But we have absolutely gotten rid of the second access point.
Driveway on the other,
Right now, there's a driveway. You can come in Georgia and you can drive straight through and come out onto First, and it's gone in this kind of a design.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple questions. I'll start with one, which is parking related. So first of all, in Georgia Avenue, the angle of the access is egress, not ingress. Is that going to be both?
Which would be, well, not even that. But, you know, coming straight down and coming, if you're leaving, you can only go out right. And if you're coming along Georgia, you can only go in. And it's an easy turn. And what DOT typically requires is a median that separates that so that we don't have people trying to make awkward movements there.
So there will be ingress as well for
Yeah.
Georgia. Okay. So parking, I have a former colleague, and I'm dating myself, but he said that parking is the Rodney Dangerfield of development. And the parking access in the garage down below for the residents, and then the parking on that side for the church and other activity, the visitors to the residents, they're going to park where?
So it'd be envisioned that they would park here, but in a lot of buildings, you know,
170 residents. I have no idea, and other people will have knowledge of what sort of volume you can anticipate. But how many spaces would you have in that front open area?
right now there's about 28 spaces there or something like that, which is plenty.
And does that relate to the number that you might expect visitors?
No, it's way more than we might expect for visitors.
Really?
Downtown, we do buildings that are complete sites, and we'll have 7 to 10 spaces in a 180 to 200 unit building, and that's typically sufficient.
And
Just to respond to the parking question, because I know as the pastor of this congregation that there is significant anxiety about parking on our end too. We were reminded in a conversation with our development team just this week that parking is going to continue to be one of the most significant and complex questions we answer. We're not going to have answers for another 4 to 6 months. The first thing we have to really answer is the massing question. And what you've seen here are two different models, a 4-story massing and a 7 max and a 7-story massing max, which themselves come with different complexities. The 4-story massing is much cheaper to build because it doesn't trigger any bacon lovers in the room? It doesn't trigger something called Davis-Bacon, which is a federal law that requires a certain wage scale for employees working in a building over 4 stories. So if we go up to 7 stories, keep in mind the steeple's 12, you'll see that shortly. If we go up to 7, that increases the cost of the project overall by about 20%, right? So if you're looking at a $30 million building at 4 stories, add 20% on top of that for a 7-story. So we're trying to answer that question in the massing plan right now. Parking is going to be harder for us to figure out. And for church folks, remember, we now rent the lot at the DHHS facility for overflow, just knowing that we already fill up our lot on Sunday mornings.
One other question about the affordability aspect, and if this is going to be addressed later, I'm happy to hold off. In terms of, say, the townhomes stick on the right side and those facing, First Avenue, is there an ownership rental decision that's been made, or how does that all work, and how does the affordable notion tie in with the attainable notion? Is that a later conversation? I don't want to.
I'm here, but it is envisioned that we're trying to create home ownership opportunities for low, middle, and we potentially might have some market rate units here. That just is there's a lot to be decided.
A moment about the ownership model. There are a bunch of different ways we can come at that. At least for us, I know part of the conversation is having homes for our pastors on the site as well, making sure that our clergy are living in the community that we're building. We currently own a home over in Woodside Park that we will likely have to monetize as a part of this project to help fund church redevelopment work. One of the things that may be included, you heard, is market rate townhomes. That's an if, not a will be. The goal is to, as much as possible, keep this a 100% affordable building. So I just wanted to reemphasize that as a part of the vision that the church has cast.
So we've got a few more slides to get through. So this, we've really pretty much gone over this. This shows you how this might all mass out and as a final plan. And we talked about how it steps, et cetera. So I think it'd be good to just start to look at these other elements. So again, keep in mind these are very conceptual, and these buildings evolve 30 times between now and even the end of the year. So, but this is a view, an aerial view, so everything looks bigger because it's trying to show the overall concept. But from George Avenue, the church here, the spire, as you heard the pastor say, is 5 to 7 stories taller than the tallest portion of the building. We're looking at having the center part of the building be the tallest, and then looking at, we don't have all of these figured out yet, but how you might be able to modulate this down to relate. We're trying to keep away. You can see how we've stepped the building so that it creates sort of a forced perspective site-wise. And then looking at it from First Avenue, you can see the 3-story townhomes. And on one of them, it's hard to see here, but on one of them, we just implied that, the top level could even be a mansard type roof to start breaking it down. We're going to show you some precedent images in a bit that, that would be something that we'd want to really talk with the community about. We talked in the charrette about using similar materials, similar window patterns, trying to make the scale and the texture feel the same. And then you see how it steps up some. This is showing it as if it steps completely up to 6, and this actually is drawn a little bit incorrectly. The 7 doesn't occur all the way in the front. But so then let's go to the next one.
Real quick, one other thing you can see from this is how far away the building is from those neighboring houses and how much more space that gives them.
So these, unfortunately, we've got to figure out a way to make this program called SketchUp not go to this super wide angle. The super wide angle causes everything to be foreshortened. So it seems like the building is like piled up tightly. But this is about the height of where the roof line breaks on the houses on First. The gray one would be an existing house. And you can see the height of the 2.5-story and then the 4-story, and then as we step up. Of course, we'd have a great landscaping package as part of all of this. And this is looking from the other side, just to give you, and you can start to see this mansard idea right there, and how low in scale. So again, this is a house mass over on the other side of First. And you can see how narrow the street looks because of the wide angle.
And you can see kind of the height comparison when you're getting up to like the 4-story portion, the 3-4-story portions. You can see how that compares to the houses across the street.
For neighbors who know, that's Chris Parkin's house. For neighbors who know. That's Chris. Oh, hello. I do that most Sunday mornings just to make sure people are awake. For people who know, that's Chris Parkin's house.
And then this is a view standing down at the corner of Ballard and Georgia. And you can see that depending on how tall you are, you can start to see a little bit of the building peeking up, but with the trees and everything, you just really wouldn't even know it existed. And then this is coming the other way down Georgia, and the existing townhome community is in gray here. And again, you can see how the building, as it's currently massed, would look. And then I somewhat hate to show these kind of things because, you know, some of these are modern, some of these aren't. This is just to try to show you scale and get you thinking about texture and you know, I've heard some people say, I really would like to see something more modern there. And you know, I know in my community, the modern houses are looked down upon, but you know, this gives you an idea of how the units can be set so that they break down in mass and in scale. I like this one because it starts to relate to an interior space like the courtyard that or like the walkway that we have coming between the 2/2s in the main building. Go to the next one. You know, we can start to make, this is actually a duplex, and we can start to use, you know, siding or other types of materials. We could introduce some pitched elements if we wanted to, although pitched elements make things feel a little bit taller, and we do then have some window issues. And, you know, this one, I really didn't particularly like this thing, but otherwise the traditional styling of it may be something that could be appropriate. Then, you know, on the rooftops and in spaces between the buildings, like the space that I mentioned that's built into that little corner across from the entrance to the church. You know, having spaces like this, maybe introducing some water elements, you can see how well lighting is done. And then up on the roofs, you know, this is we can create, probably not a tree that big in this building because we're going to build it out of wood. But, excuse me, we can create these wonderful spaces up on the roof. And in some cases, and that would, I was going to say that in some cases, owners allow community access that for very specific purposes, but we'll leave that be. And some other plaza spaces, you know, utilizing lighting that sort of invigorates the space. I could see that happening, you know, over the playground that we have starting to be developed up in the front corner, so that at night it would have a sort of a special lighting to define it. You know, defining spaces with pergolas, utilizing different types of materials for the planting. And I think we have one or two more. Again, just a lot of different ways we can create the look of this, but this could be like the terrace down into this space beside the church right in here. And these retaining walls and stairs are similar to what would be coming in off of First Street and coming down into the gardens.
And with that, that is all we have for you. Do we have any questions?
I'm sure we do.
Hi, that was great. I thought it looked fabulous. I missed the past couple meetings and it's really beautiful. My question, I'm confused about parking because you said it was going to be, is it underground or is it just pretend underground? Because you said it was going to push up the building to 5 stories, but if it's underground, why would it push it up? So I was just confused.
In the first several schemes we looked at, we allowed it to be above ground at the grade here at the church, but it would be tucked into the ground up at first. In this scheme, what we did is, even here, we've dropped it down so that it's only protruding maybe 2.5
So it's
feet.
like half underground, half not. Because I know it gets
And-
very expensive when you go underground. So I was like, that's a big money thing.
Right.
And my other money question is, those pictures are great and I'm so easy to persuade with marketing, but when you talk about those images, they tend to be $4,000 apartments in Navy Yard. They don't always make it when you spit out affordable housing. So it's like, you can have courts. No, you're really only gonna get Formica. That kind of situation. Is there anything built in to actually make those realistic? Because I feel like we're marketing something that price-wise may not play out. So I'm just the discrepancy there.
Ned, you can comment on what I say, but we do a lot of affordable, and you cannot distinguish it from market rate. Actually, most of our projects do have courts in them these days. The PLAM may be $200 less per unit, but you're going to replace that. So what you end up seeing in affordable housing is, we use a higher standard of cabinet that we do in an affordable product than we do in a market rate product. Because in a market rate product, somebody moves out, they trash the cabinets, they toss them, and they put in new cabinets. In an affordable product, they've got one bite at the apple. And the same thing with landscaping. Ned's a civil engineer. He's going to really make sure we get fabulous landscaping and site design.
Well, yeah, she wasn't asking about landscaping, but affordable housing, there's a misnomer about affordable housing that the affordability is created by the quality of the construction of the products. That may have been something 50 years ago. That is not what affordable housing is today. What makes housing affordable is financing. It's not the materials, it's not the workmanship, it's not the craftsmanship, it's not the product. Where we can value engineer, we certainly will, because everything. The one thing that we start with, and I say that this at the first of any inception of any deal, financially, affordable housing deal doesn't work, right? Because you're not getting the income at the end to pay for what you're having to build up front. So the only thing that makes affordable housing work is the financing. We use low-income housing tax credits. We use subsidies from the local jurisdictions. We use all those things to create that affordability. There's nothing affordable about the construction. The only thing that's affordable is to the end user. So this product is not really discernible. We will certainly, like any developer, try to find ways that we can do things economically, because the less that we have to spend on the product means the less we have to find subsidy, because that's really what affordable housing is about finding that subsidy, finding those resources that are out there in multiple places. Some of our developments we have 9, 10 different sources of financing. And some of that is low-income housing tax credits. Some of that is home money, federal funds, grants, philanthropic stuff. The laundry list of what we put into these deals is amazing. It is not for the faint of heart. I used to have brown hair and about 50 pounds less, so it's very stressful to go through this, but it's rewarding in the end. Yeah, well, what we do a lot of times, if anybody wants to, we'll take people on tours of what is affordable housing. And we go through an educational process on because we go through that mindset of what affordable is, and they think of tenement housing from the 50s or something, and it's not what affordable housing is today. And the low-income housing tax credit, I hate the name of it because the way it connotates certain images, but it is a phenomenal tool. It's been around since the mid-'80s. And what it has done is privatize what was in a public space. So a lot of people think of affordable housing as public housing. This is not public housing. This is private housing. It's privately owned, operated, managed, maintained. and the investments that are in it. I mean, there's a lot of safeguards against it. It's the tax credit program is not a HUD program. It's an IRS program, and investors that invest in this type of stuff, because of the safeguards that are built in, there's recapture events, and nobody wants to have a recapture event. so the idea is these investments are very safe. They're amazing products at the end. I mean, the default rate on these things is infinitesimal when compared to market rate products, because, I mean, who wouldn't want to live in something like this for $800 a month instead of $4,000? And that's really what we're talking about here.
Neighbor across the street, Fran Meyer. Anyway, I'm asking two things minor. When you thought about terracing outside Fellowship Hall, that was on the Georgia Avenue side? Out here to terrace?
Yeah, when you walk out the main entrance this afternoon, take a look, you'll see a big pit. It's right there.
Okay, thank you. And the townhomes, are we thinking that it's always going to be 7? Is that number ever going to go up somewhere? Get 7, but we're working duplexes, so it should be 8. Where did you get that number from? Can that expand? Will that lower? I like the townhome duplex. I think it is the best way to meet us on our street. I just don't know if that number is sticking or how you got it.
So those that front right on First are the 3-story, 2.5-story. There's 6 of those. But then with the 2/2s that we wing back on as we come into the site, can you point those out? Right over here. That adds 6 more. So that's, right now we have 12 townhome units. And with the possibility, it's hard to get a 4-bedroom and a 2/2. And for right now, what we've designed spatially is those modules on First Avenue could be 4-bedroom units. Could be.
So the advantage of having this thing is that you're getting different size of the townhome
Yes.
that you're getting. So some would be, so the massing over on the right is the ones that would not be the 4 bedrooms. The one on First would be 4 bedrooms.
Right, and these ones on First, originally we envisioned, 2/2s, double the number of units you get. And originally we said, well, what do we put 2/2s there? Well, the problem is, even though you tuck it down, it's still 3.5 stories tall. And that's why we said, okay, to really meet the scale of First, we think we want to go to 3 stories, 2.5 showing. Just to try to respond to you as a neighbor.
I'm thrilled that we're up to 12.
And all of these, I should have ended the presentation. This is one idea. It's the team that we're working with just within the church, I'm sure, is going to have modifications, and we're going to have modifications, and the development team is going to have modifications, and the financing is going to change things. But we wanted to show you something that we thought met the needs. One idea that met the needs.
I think people should go down to Spring Street. You've got townhouses across from townhouses, or the look of townhouses in the new development at the planning board site. And that's how they also tried to make it equal to those townhouses. It rises a little bit, and then it rises higher and higher. The terraces, I also think, are similar to the terrace along Spring Street at whatever, Woodside Station, I can't remember what they called it. Fenwick? Is that going down to the back to the track? It's terrace similar, I think, to what you're talking about. And I would love to see a online walkthrough of one of your affordable housing units would be fantastic, I think, for the neighborhood to be able to see.
So Spring Road is our project. We designed the Spring Road project that you were mentioning.
Atwell?
Oh, you're talking about Spring Road here?
Yeah.
Oh,
Bizzuto.
okay.
That's being built by Bizzuto right along Spring Street
yes.
between First
Yeah.
Avenue and whatever. No, it's not even First, it's Georgia, on around into downtown Silver Spring.
So we have one in DC that has townhomes, and you described them exactly like what ours are like, and then it steps up beyond, but anyhow.
But anyway, the suggestion is a virtual tour of one of your affordable housing units that we could publicize in the neighborhood to help with the understanding that Kristen now has that's better, a better understanding of affordable.
Timmy and Michael, could you speak to the frontage of those townhomes on First and about where they are adjacent to the current house that sits on First, that's church property? Does that make sense? So given where the house sits now that Pastor Daniel lives in,
Can
where
you
is
look
that
back to the
comparatively speaking, so
slide?
folks might get a sense for distance?
Just need to, okay, so see the setback line right here? The house is actually sitting, according to this, about a foot off there. And those houses, those townhouse modules that we're showing along there are actually 6 feet back from that property line. So they're actually 6 feet further back from the street than the current house is.
Space created along First Avenue from what's currently there, including eating up that parking lot paved space. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
You can see it's hard to see here, but that's that same line, and then you can see we've held it back here. We've got, what we're thinking we would do is enter actually up that half level up. And so we'd have nice little stair stoops that go up and porches possibly to, again, create texture, but that also, it was done to pull the buildings further back.
Might be jumping the gun, but can you give us a big picture timeline? Like how many years till breaking ground? What construction would be? I know.
If they got into a tax credit round that maybe is going to happen in the beginning of 25, and then it gets awarded middle to third quarter of 25. What's in 25? Funding round for the funding that the low-income housing tax credit funding. So then, it depends on whether they feel comfortable letting us start documents early or not. If we waited for that all to happen, then it takes a year to do documents for something like this, and then another 6 months for permitting and getting the bids. So we're talking about mid 27, early 28 to see construction start. And this is probably, at this scale, it's a 26-month project, something like that.
That answers my question. How long do we have to, I live across the street, how long will construction take? Because this is a heavy construction. It's going to impact, I'm old now, I'm 75. So we're talking about, the last part of my life, I'm going to be living across the street from really a whole noisy thing. So you're saying it's probably going to take, would you say 2 years, 2.5 years?
Yeah, but it's not, so once you get out, you got to excavate a little bit, hope, minimize that. And this isn't going down like a lot of the buildings that have deep garages. And then you'll quickly get this frame up, 9-10 months in, we'll have a frame up. Once that's in, a lot of stuff starts to become much quieter activities. But, you guys will have a lot of say. There will not be construction traffic allowed on First Avenue, period. I can guarantee you that. We do projects all throughout the city. We've got one on Western right now. Western and Livingston, Rizzuto's doing it. We've got $2.5 million homes right across the street, and we're doing our best to keep them happy. And I think we, for the most part, are.
Forgive the follow-up on the parking question, which is really simply how the church is planning to manage its half of the underground parking, and/or does its parking, is it always open? Do members of the church have to have pass? I mean, I don't know how that works. I'm just curious if that is at all been yet addressed, and I apologize if it's too far ahead down the road. Thank
It may be a little bit far ahead for us. I think part of the great gift that we have right now at Silver Spring is that we're a growing congregation. So part of the struggle has been in part, how are we going to make sure we have enough parking for future growth? As we live into this process, as we figure out what's going to happen with the DHHS facility next door and potential, construction there, that's all going to impact what we do with parking. I do anticipate, as we've been having conversations with our development team, the majority of our members drive within a 4-mile radius of the church. The vast number of new people attending are coming from right in downtown Silver Spring. So encouraging people to carpool, encouraging people to walk, encouraging people to use public transit is part both of helping manage parking issues as well as our faith commitment to moving less heavily on the earth. We don't know yet is the answer. But there will be conversations about how we do that moving forward.
I wasn't able to make the beginning of this meeting, so it looks like you had drawings of what you're thinking of right now, which might change. I'm considering what it's going to look like as far as I live in a historic house on the Historic Atlas, Montgomery County Historic Atlas, and if you guys, because this is a different kind of development on private property, do you have does this have to go through the county historic commission, or are you separate? There's no overlap because.
So I can speak to that. We are, and I know this because we're going to have to replace our sanctuary windows, and so we had to ask the county if we had to go through historical consulting. We do not. However, baked into the charter of our committee is the commitment to making sure that what we build in the neighborhood reflects the aesthetics of both our building and the neighborhood. So that's been clear from the beginning in our values. It's in our memorandum of understanding with our development partners as well. So the church is holding that value regardless of whether or not we have to go through historical consultation with the county.
Process, especially for the design of that streetscape. It's a small enough element of the project that making that be the right materials, be the right scale, be the right rhythms to work with a home like yours in a complementary way is important.
Where does the gym intersect this project? And how does that, I'd just like to see where it's met.
Is there one where you see, go back to where you started? Yeah, here. So while this is the garage, the gym actually sits a floor below, as you know, it's down underground. So we're envisioning that from the lobby of the building, which would be up here on top, you can either come down a great stair, and there's a corridor here to a classroom space that may be programmed into storage for the gym, and then there would be an elevator also coming to that. And then there's some restrooms here that would be reprogrammed. They don't meet accessibility standards, and with a gym use, you need to have accessible bathrooms and more bathrooms. And so there's a linkage to the upper level, and the way it's currently envisioned, the lobby would happen on the floor above and could be looking down into the gym, and we were trying to make it feel very connected. And then there's an opportunity here, because the building actually has potentially could have a jog here, that we could actually create an after-hours entrance, assuming that housing could make that work security-wise and felt comfortable with it, so that you could have neighborhood users access it. And they could always access it through the lobby and down.
Is there much money planned to redo that space? It's pretty ancient. The gym itself.
There's money planned for a lot of things, including that. The planning of the money is still.
I mean, you call that an amenity, but it's a pretty sad gym.
It would. The funding sources would not allow it to stay the way it is. It's got a lot of humidity problems, it's got a lot of HVAC problems, it's got roof problems, it'll be, essentially new inside.
Right, it's a mixed bag. I know it well, I know it for 40 years. But anyway, I just wonder how much, what the value of it is, whether that could be used in another way. To me, it almost needs to be, I know what you're doing with it, I know its value, but there's just a lot that needs to be sunk into it, and I question if that's the best use of that.
I laughed, Fran, and I'm sorry, because when Dylan and I, my partner, first toured the space, he insisted that's where COVID started. The gym is a special place in the life of this congregation. It was where, for the first year and a half of their occupancy of the site, they worshiped. And so we have members whose children got married there. We have members whose parents' funerals were there. And we're walking that line between honoring that history and connection, the great need for spaces like it in the county. So one of the emerging conversations right now in this area of Down County, both as we work with partners like Interfaith Works, and Reverend Rosalind Roberts from Interfaith Works is here with us today, in Shepherd's Table, is the fact that the county does not have many facilities available for their clients to use, like the gym, as well as the fact that there are incentives on the tax credit side of things that might allow us to do some of that renovation. The difficulty we're having now is figuring out what building design makes the most sense so that we know whether or not preserving that space is possible. If the church chooses to renovate it separately from the development project, we're looking at a cost of approximately $2 million, is that what you said, for that space, which may or may not ultimately make financial sense based on all the other needs of the congregation. So I think that'll get clearer as we get clearer about the design of the building.
I want to thank everybody. You're always so engaged, and it's really helpful and wonderful because, I've been in meetings years in the past where it was not in my backyard, constant, and this has been a very accepting and open community, so I appreciate that. And then I want to thank our teammates, but I really especially want to give a shout out to Min and Temi for all the hard work they put into creating this in a way that conveys it without making it feel like it's an etched in stone project, which it isn't yet. Yes, thank you. I hope you enjoy your weekends.
So really quickly before we go, I just want to make a couple of quick introductions and provide some final follow-up. So we're so glad to have with us today Reverend Lucinda Kent, who is our Baltimore, Washington Annual Conference Property with Purpose Coordinator. Among many of the hats that she wears, she's also the pastor of one of our partner congregations, Van Buren United Methodist Church. Pastor Cindy, we're glad you're with us today. You've already heard that Ned Howe is with us today. Ned represents Enterprise Community Development and is one of the critical partners in this work. So Ned, we're glad that you're with us today. And then Reverend Rosalind Roberts, who represents Interfaith Works, is with us today as well. Roz has been a partner in good trouble in the county. I look forward to more of it. If you have been supporting Interfaith Works efforts related to fundraising for the recent fire at the women's shelter, Roz has been coordinating that. If you want to continue supporting that, if you want to learn more about what happened, I encourage you to talk with her before you leave today. Very quickly, at the back of the sanctuary, there are flyers on a table just out the doors. There are 2 dates we want to share with you now, as well as just some general information about how you can stay connected. So next Saturday at 10 a.m., we will gather just on the portico here for an informal time of conversation and coffee and or lemonade, depending upon the relative humidity. About the project, about some of the spaces that we're talking about. There'll be a walking element to that so you can begin to see some of the spaces. We'll have some of these pictures so that we can show you perspectives from various vantage points in the property. I encourage you all to participate in that and invite your neighbors to participate in that. The following day, on Sunday, following our worship service at 11:30, we'll have our every month coffee with the pastor, and we'll primarily be focused on conversations related both to this project as well as upcoming renovations and restoration of certain spaces within our building, which we'll be sharing more about tomorrow in worship. Finally, I want to make sure that you notice the QR code on the bottom of that flyer. If you scan that with your smartphone or smart device, it'll take you to a page where you can sign up for the monthly newsletter being produced by our Building Beloved Community Committee. That committee is the committee that's been chartered with helping lead this process and project for us. And naming them, I want to just recognize the members of the committee who are with us today. So if you would rise so folks can see you. We're not putting a target on your back, I promise. Many thanks to them and all the effort that they have put in. As Pastor Cindy has so graciously shared with us, our project really is not just about this congregation, but it's about inspiring faith communities to think differently about how we can respond to this critical need in our county and in our communities, regardless of where we are. If you are aware of other faith communities that are considering this work, please feel free to share this information with them, connect them back to us. We're happy to be partners with them in that work as well. Thank you.